few years ago, I finished for the first time the legendary game Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals. I really enjoyed it and wanted to see where the story went after this game. Since Lufia 2 is a prequel, this meant that the next game I had to play was the first game in the series, Lufia and the Fortress of Doom. In this video, I will talk about my experience playing the first Lufia game while showing screenshots I took during my playthrough. When people say that Lufia 1 is a sequel to Lufia 2, they're not kidding. Lufia 1 famously starts with the last dungeon from Lufia 2. It's a full dungeon with multiple rooms to explore. It's really impressive that they made fully playable characters with their own sprites, stats, spells, and equipment just for this first part of the game. I wonder if it was planned in advance that they would eventually make a prequel to this game starring these characters. Maybe they were so confident that this game would be a success that they planned this far ahead. Nevertheless, this prelude to the story is amazing and I really enjoyed it. Plus, the music of this part is super epic. This is really a great way to begin the game. Later in the game, you'll revisit this dungeon, but it will be all in ruins. You get a real feeling of nostalgia when visiting a dungeon you've been to several hours before. This is a really effective way to reuse game assets. The second time you visit this dungeon, it's in ruins because this game is set 100 years after Lufia 2. Even though the game takes place so long after Lufia 2, some characters are still alive. One character is an elf, so that's to be expected, but another character is still alive because he's some badass superhuman. Since I played Lufia 2 before, it was really nice to see again characters I've spent many hours playing with. As for the characters of Lufia 1, the main character is a descendant of the protagonist of Lufia 2. Since he doesn't have a canon name and looks like a typical JRPG hero, I decided to call him Hero. I've seen other people use this name for this character as well. You are a warrior sent by the king on a mission to investigate whether the rumor of monsters invading the neighboring town is true. This escalates into you having to defeat 4 great evils that have been resurrected. But like Lufia 2, this game is very episodic, and you do a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with your main quest. This leads you to visit many different areas. One of my favorite places in the game is a dungeon where professional adventurers search for treasures. There's a whole system around this dungeon crawling business with a reception desk in the cave and everything. I find it really fascinating. It gives me vibes of Hunter x Hunter or something like that. I really enjoyed exploring that dungeon. A reception desk is not the only strange thing you can find in a dungeon. You can also find some inns in the dungeons in the game. One of the innkeepers even admits that it's strange to have an inn located in a dungeon. There are several lines of funny dialogue like that. I thought the dialogue was pretty well written overall. They paid attention to details like making kids talk like kids. But aside from the cool details you can find in the dungeons, Lufia and the Fortress of Doom is a very traditional JRPG. It even has the old school blue menus. The graphics are very bright and beautiful. They may look a little generic, but there are a few details that make them stand out. For example, while the dialogue still has the classic blue background and white outline, it now appears in bubbles like a comic book. I thought that was really cool. As you might expect from a traditional JRPG, all the characters are cute chibi sprites with short arms. They differ from other JRPGs in that they have gray outlines and no white pixels in their eyes. These gray outlines can look weird because sometimes the sprites have colors that are darker than the outlines. I usually prefer black outlines, but it grew on me after a while. It fits well with the overall style of the game. There are quite a few character sprites. They even went out of their way to make child sprites of Hero and Lufia for a very brief scene at the beginning of the game. That's pretty impressive. Also, for some reason, all the shopkeepers seem to be wearing modern army uniforms. Maybe they are army otakus or something like that. During battles, the enemies also look cute, but they are much larger and more detailed. Even though they keep the semi-chibi art style, some of the bosses look really badass and imposing. And like any good old shonen anime, they are so powerful that you can see their aura. Later in the game, regular enemies are as big as bosses. This is really effective in making you feel that you've become stronger, that you're fighting a bigger tread. Another interesting thing about battles is that there are no backgrounds. Instead, the environment becomes darker. This helps to make the colorful enemy sprites stand out. Speaking of environments, they look great. I especially like the overworld. The transparency effect of the clouds looks nice, and the indigo blue water is beautiful. At the beginning of the game, you walk around very medieval-looking environments like castles and such. As you progress through the game, you will explore more technologically advanced environments such as laboratories. Like the enemies that get bigger, this helps to give a sense of progression. There are also a lot of graphical elements that are reminiscent of Dragon Quest. For example, the inside of some walls have a grid pattern, some tiles are red, and there are brick floors. And like several Dragon Quest games, you can see your entire party as you walk around. The fun of exploring these beautiful environments is enhanced by the amazing music. What makes the soundtrack of Lufia and the Fortress of Doom stand out are the amazing melodies. I especially like the trumpet melody in the overworld. It's the kind of epic music that sends shivers down your spine. The music of Lufia 2's prelude also has a really good trumpet melody, but Lufia 1 doesn't just have grandiose, epic music. It also has cute, cheerful tunes like the one that plays when you enter the menu screen of a store. It makes you happy and tricks you into wanting to buy stuff. And if you want to buy the best gear from the shops when you arrive in a new town, you will have to do some grinding to farm gold. It is not mandatory to advance in the game, but I enjoy grinding, so I always do it. Later in the game, you'll get pretty rich, so you won't have to do any grinding anymore to farm gold. While you are in town, you should check every dresser and similar furniture. Some of them have hidden items that are quite useful. You may also find hidden areas such as a secret underground passage. It is also a good idea to stock up on healing items, as some enemies hit hard and you may encounter several of them in a single fight. Also, like the very first Final Fantasy game, you will waste an attack turn if the enemy you selected to attack is already defeated. You won't automatically select a different target like most JRPGs released after Final Fantasy 1. Also, some of the bosses are quite challenging. The Dark Ghost of the Red Tower was one of the bosses I remember having a hard time beating. That being said, since it's the kind of RPG where you can stock up to 99 of every item, and sometimes you can even heal your party completely in some dungeons, I never really felt like I was in much danger. And since you can fully heal in some dungeons, you can grind for XP forever if you want. However, since you lose a party member from the last dungeon to the last boss, I never felt compelled to grind to max level. You should keep a save file before this last part of the game if you plan to level every character. One thing I did, however, was to give all stat boosting potions to the main character. It feels great when the main character is the most powerful character in the game. Many of the dungeons you explore are cleverly designed. For example, in the first cave of the game, you can access a different part of the cave by using a different entrance. Some dungeons can get a bit tedious though. For example, there's a part of the game where you have to find colored gems in 3 different towers and a cave. This requires a lot of backtracking. That being said, the dungeons are generally quite fun to explore. There's also a side quest where you have to find 8 dragon eggs hidden in the dungeons you have to explore. It's a fun side quest that's not too hard to complete. Overall, I really enjoyed playing Lufia and the Fortress of Doom. Sometimes I just want to play a traditional JRPG with JRPG aesthetics and gameplay. With its amazing music and beautiful graphics, Lufia is just that, but perfected. When people talk about the Lufia franchise, they usually talk about Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals. Sure, Lufia 2 has more features and a more refined gameplay, but Lufia 1 is still a great game and deserves the spotlight every now and then. Thank you for watching and see you next time.